Hi everyone, I am Vipul Nanda
Hi everyone, I'm Varun Trivedi.
and we are the co-founders of GoPMM. Welcome back to the GoPMM podcast. Today we have the awesome Yi Lin Pei with us. She's one of the world's most prominent product marketing coaches and career advisors. She transitioned from being a product marketing leader at such companies such as Teachable, Bright Flag, and View before starting courageous careers. We're very excited to have her with us today. Now, Yelan, most of the time we begin by asking people what their product marketing origin story is. So why don't we get started with yours? Because everyone has their own.
Of course. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Just to give you a little bit of background, I actually started off my career as a transportation engineer. I was working for consulting companies, and my clients were government agencies. So I would actually solve problems like how do we solve congestion issues, on the highway and things like that, which is 100% different from product marketing. I was doing that for 6 years, and I was on my way actually to becoming a partner at the firm when I just realized that was not what I was wanted to do because it was funny because one of my mentors at the time at the company, he was retiring and he was talking about, oh, what's the future of this industry like and everything. And I realized whatever he was doing 30 years ago was the same thing I was working on. There was like literally no change in the industry, and I don't want to stay there. So while I was going through my own existential crisis at the time, I decided to go do my MBA because I was like, okay, that's the thing you do when you don't know what your future is, right? And so I did my MBA at UC Berkeley, and when I took a marketing class, instantly a light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I want to be doing with my life because I think it perfectly combines the creativity, the strategic mindset with quantitative information as well to really drive outcomes for businesses. And I started pivoting into there. And as you can imagine, it was very challenging to pivot into product marketing in a tech company from a non-tech, non-marketing background. But after experiencing a lot of setbacks and challenges, I realized I really should figure out what is my competitive differentiation and my targeting, basically applying product marketing principles to myself. So I product marketed myself and then was able to land a role at Autodesk because Autodesk sells to civil engineers. So my background was like a really great fit. From there, my tech career really took off. I was at different stages, startups as well as large companies. Went from being in the team of PMMs to being the founding PMM to building out entire product marketing functions. And throughout that entire process, what made me really excited and I felt like was my superpower was actually building and coaching my own team. What was interesting is even other people who are not part of my team, they would come to me to ask me questions. So I would kind of informally mentor them. And I just really enjoyed that as well. And during COVID, unfortunately, a lot of people got laid off. And so I was like, hey, I'm happy to help people out, right? Just pro bono, just reviewing a resume and everything. And just turned out that I was able to get all of them jobs. And they were like super thankful. So they were like literally asking me, like, hey, Eileen, did you think about doing this full time? So it just kind of built itself organically. And that was about 5 years ago. And since then, I have basically what I call I've created a verticalized coaching service within product marketing. So I help people land jobs, grow and onboard in their new job, and then also thrive once they're in there by helping them get promoted, be seen, and stuff like that. And last year, I've also sort of started doing more advising, which kind of also naturally came out of my coaching because some of the people who are coach are actually founders. So I also advise those founders on how to build a great product marketing function, what is the right go-to-market strategy, helping them with positioning, messaging, so on and so forth. So that is very long-winded. So, but I appreciate you asking the question.
No, I think all good origin stories have to have a beginning, middle, and end. And I think that's a lovely one to have you go through a process of going through these challenges and then helping other people bridge that same gap and make that transition. So, I mean, folks like you make it possible for everyone else. So that's always something we can be grateful for.
Thank you.
Now, Helen, one of the reasons we're having this conversation is that there's a lot of noise around artificial intelligence, the impact that it could have on product marketing in general. Like there's a lot of fear and loathing from detractors who keep talking about how it's not real. And there are some folks that probably need a perplexity search to find that toothbrush in the morning, to get the day started. Now, somewhere in the middle of all of that, and when you talk about balancing the creative and the strategic and the data driven part, uh, I mean, it's not secret. It's not a spoiler alert. Like Varun and I've read your report, and we know that that's at the heart of how you've talked about AI. But before we get into the depth of it, at a broad level, what is your perception about the role of artificial intelligence for product marketers, for product marketing, and for technology companies in general, where product marketing has usually found a home?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me actually take a step back and answer your question a little bit differently, if that's okay. Um, Whenever I think about what the future holds, I try to look into the past, right? Because the history always repeats itself, right? And really, in the world, there's nothing truly new because it's just repeating one thing after another. So when people were telling me product marketing is dead, like I literally had people write me messages to say, "Hey, do you think it's dead?" I heard a hiring manager telling me it's dead, which was really bizarre to me, anyways. And then I was like, okay, well, let's actually think back to the origin of product marketing. If you think about even marketing as a function, it started actually over 100 years ago with CPG companies, right? Consumer packaged goods companies like Procter and Gamble first really formalized the role of brand manager, which is essentially the marketing person who is understanding what customer wants, figure out how to market to them, creating the ads, right? Distribute and everything. And that's when these kind of marketing really took off. And then from there, it evolved into more data-driven approaches with like Ogilvy and Mather, right, the father of advertising, talking about using market research to understand consumer behavior and then producing ads from there. And then, of course, as technology developed in the 80s, 90s, and everything, the product marketer title really came about when we're helping people basically market software, hardware products like computers, right? Things like that. And then of course it evolved more in the cloud age, where the role of product marketer is really being formalized more and more to include things from enablement, right? Research, positioning, messaging, and so on and so forth. So I feel like now it's kind of like the fifth wave of technology change, right? So it's adding a layer of AI on top. And it could change it in different ways. We can't predict, right? But what I know from just looking to the past is this: at any point in the past 100 years, there has always been a need for people who market products to the market, because by definition, if a business exists, they need to market their product, right? And if you want to stand out and make your product the most compelling, you have to be different than everybody else. And that is where the art comes in. Going back to the point of AI by definition blends everything together, right? Because it's an aggregation of information. And so it can help you get 80% there to produce a result that is good enough, but it's not going to be exceptional. And I think that exceptional part of the 20% of the craft is where I think product marketing is going to go in the age of AI, to really differentiate those people who are doing an absolute amazing job from those people who are doing a mediocre job. Not sure, did I answer your question?
No, you absolutely did. And that's exactly the kind of lead into, I think, what Varun wants to ask you next.
Right. So your report on AI and PMMs recently went viral. I mean, so many people I've seen there sharing about it, talking about it, and it actually gives a clear indicator of not just how relevant it is, but how concerned and interested PMMs are in adopting and integrating AI into the daily lives. For a report, you must have did a lot of research and studying. So based on your research at a broad level, how are PMMs using AI today? And can you break it down into spectrum from AI natives and early adopters to those who still prefer like typewriters? They are into old age era.
Absolutely. It's definitely a very interesting finding that from the report itself. I will say, generally, when you look at the adoption of AI across the board, the report found 95% of PMMs use AI today, right? And more than 70% of them actually use it daily. So that is basically ubiquitous adoption of AI. And then now you look deeper into how does this vary by the role and the title of each person. You realize that mostly the people adopting a lot of AI are actually the mid-level PMMs. Mid-level PMMs are actually the ones adopting AI the most, followed by the more junior PMMs or intro-level PMMs. And of course, as you can imagine, not surprisingly, the senior leaders are the ones adopting AI the least, because most of the time they're just delegating work, so they're not actually doing the actual work themselves, right? So none of that is very surprising. The other thing that was also very interesting is the amount of what kind of tools they're using when it comes to AI. Most people by far are using ChatGPT. By far, I think it was like everybody pretty much was surveyed was using ChatGPT, right? And other LLMs essentially, like Perplexity, right, like Claude, and so on and so forth. What was really surprising actually was how much adoption there is for purpose-built tools when it comes to AI. For instance, an AI native tool that helps you do writing, like a Jasper or Copy.ai or things like that. Actually, there isn't that much adoption. Less than half of companies of people surveyed that actually using one of those tools. So to me, it really shows like a divide between AI, sort of like more simpler use cases of AI, people are just doing it on their own, versus companies actually implementing entire AI systems, right? And adopting AI tools purposely built for that specific function. So I think there's a large spectrum of how AI is adopted. The other thing that's not captured in report are the anecdotal information I get from talking to actual people. That's really hard to capture because I know people who work at places like Shopify, which is extremely advanced. Basically, in some senses, the product marketers there are competing with each other to build the best agents and workflows. Yes, it's almost like, and then when they're making any hiring decision, they have to justify that the work cannot be done by AI to make any new hire. So that is extreme. And I do think there are positive sides to it from just talking with clients that I work with, right, who work at Shopify, which is great that they are learning so much and so fast because it's important for their job. Otherwise, they will not have the job anymore. But it's also very stressful. And now there's other people who are working at banking institutions or more traditional institutionalized places where there literally is no AI. Like they cannot use any AI tools because of data restrictions, just because of the sector that they're in, the type of customers they serve, right? So we're seeing just like a large spectrum across the PMM world right now.
But just a follow-up question. Do you think in this kind of sector where data sharing and security would be a big concern, possibility of enterprise AI, built for only that company is the future?
I think it's absolutely possible. And I do think the enterprise AI is getting more traction.
Right.
There are a lot of companies, right? The Glean, for instance, I think has traction right now as an enterprise AI solution. So absolutely. But I do think there is the adoption of the tool built for enterprise, but also just maybe the attitude within that particular sector. Um,
Right.
and how receptive they are to new technology. To your point, there's going to be very early adopters and laggards. There will always be people who don't do anything. I think when they come to technology.
Just sorry, Vipul, one more question.
Mhm.
From your survey and talking to a lot of people, which is the sector which is using AI the most?
There is no clear winner in terms of industry because it was like a lot of distributed industries throughout, from tech, fintech, martech, edtech, everything you can possibly think of. But I will say, like generally, the less restricted industries are using AI more. Just like let's say, just like a regular general B2B SaaS company have more adoption versus companies that are in more restricted sectors.
That's a fascinating insight into the interplay of how folks are adopting AI, particularly it becoming ubiquitous this quickly. Especially because if you tell me that 90% of product marketers are using AI, I can tell you that 90% of the product marketers I'm speaking to are complaining about AI as well. So
Yeah.
there is some hypocrisy and some tension there. But if we put that to one side, I think earlier when you were talking about the state of AI and product marketing, you brought up that uh, the creative side of it has to be highlighted so that you end up differentiating yourself. And I think that sits at the heart of what a lot of people's challenge with AI is in general. That product marketing, one of its main superpowers was the ability to kind of filter out the noise and the fluff and focus on a core to say,
Yeah.
this is your persona, this is a value proposition, and to go away from the generic and get specific. And I feel that as AI gets more widely adopted, do you worry that product marketing output could become more generic and more cookie cutter?
100%, and it's already happening. I don't think it's a worry anymore. It's a reality, to be honest. And I read those all the time. And I immediately could tell that it's created by AI because there are certain ways AI writes. So there's a specific language pattern, right, from AI that you can just tell. Okay, this is written specifically for from using AI. And that's creating a situation where most companies' messaging look alike. If you look at companies' websites, it looks nice at a glance, and then you dig deeper, you're like, wait a minute, like what do these words mean? Like it just sounds very good, but it doesn't really say specifically how the product is going to solve that. So I think we're already experiencing that right now. And companies will have a harder time differentiating oneself from each other.
But don't you think that's also a concern for PMMs who are maybe mid-level or trying to rise? That there's a lot of pressure from stakeholders because everyone thinks they understand marketing, right? Like marketing is a specialized skill that is generically accessible because people will think that they understand it, which means that when you're dealing with a lot of stakeholders, even before AI, pressure from parties
Yes.
would try to push you towards the middle. They would try to make you take safer bets. And in particularly in B2B marketing, we have this weird kind of in between where everyone's trying to say the same thing. So you need to stand out, but AI is kind of pushing you towards the middle again, right? So
Mm-hmm.
how do you think in that ecosystem and with those challenges, how can product marketers make AI work? And what should they be focusing on directing AI towards so that they can continue to stand out while using AI?
Such a great question. I think there's multiple components to your question. So let me just answer them in the order I think makes most sense for me, at least. Um, I will say, regardless of whether you use AI or not, right? As a product marketer, we need to be really results focused. A lot of
Mhm.
times, the challenge with product marketing is that we're not tied to particular metrics because we don't have a metric we own. Sales have clear metrics, right,
Yeah.
to generate sales. There are other teams like demand gen, there's clear pipeline metrics, MQO
Mhm.
metrics, and whatnot, but we're kind of in the middle trying to serve different teams to help them generate results. So it's really important to think back, okay, so what? If I'm doing positioning and messaging, what is the end game? If I do good positioning messaging, am I trying to increase our awareness? Am I trying to increase our qualified pipeline? Am I trying to create higher win rates and whatnot? Probably all of the above, right? But then linking it back to the goal is going to be really important because then you can figure out how do I potentially measure the goal and track it, right? So going back to your question about leadership just says whatever, right? Which is true. Everybody thinks they know how to do marketing. You're like, no, this word should be this, right? One of the arguments you can make is like, okay, well, here's my thought based on my experience will be the best, right? And you explain rationale, but let's go ahead and test it. Let's have two versions of messaging, right? And then let's track this from early indicators, then to lagging indicators over a period of time and see what performs best. Ultimately, we need to all make money, right? Like that's the goal. That's the whole point of the whole thing. And then see what kind of results come about, basically. Like the thing the thing you can always rely on is data, right? Quantitative information, money. That's going to change the perception over time. And then to your point, now kind of going back to the AI, how does AI get involved in this whole process, especially for junior PMMs who are trying to rise up? I think they really need to focus on the fundamentals and learn what is good product marketing and make sure they actually master the process and the tasks without assistance of AI. Because what AI is doing is creating a black box, right? You're just saying, can you create position and messaging? And oof, it just gives you a bunch of stuff. And you're like, how the hell did I get here actually? That is the hard work you have to do as a product marketer to figure out from your personas. You have to painstakingly figure all the insights and then you turn it into like your value matrix and right. And then you do the value laddering. You do that hard work step by step, right? And then you refine and tweak. You get feedback from your cross-functional teams to make sure it represents truly the voice of the customer and voice of the market, right? And then you produce the final output and then you iterate again from stakeholder insights and market feedback, right? And you go from there. The process is supposed to be messy because that is what's product marketing. That is positioning messaging. It's an art and a science, and anything that involves art is messy because it's subjective, right? So it requires lots of buy-in and iterations. So, and I think to your point, right, like I know you guys are running some cohorts to teach product marketing. That is what's needed, right? Because AI cannot replace that. It actually makes it worse. So it's not a shortcut to not learning anything. So it's,
Mhm.
to me, it's learning the fundamentals, stay really close to your customer, hear what they have to say, read the transcripts, be in meetings with them. That will never replace any insight you gather from AI, right? And then you can use AI to refine and help you do some of the middle parts a little bit faster. But then you take that output they generate, you put your human spin on it, right? And then still do the stakeholder buy-in. So I'll shut up for now
No,
and
no, no.
see.
I think I couldn't agree with you more violently than I mean, than this, right? But I think where most folks that we've been speaking to would run into blockers in their work is that this is exactly how it should be, but there's always a gap between that understanding of the universe and what actually plays out in real life. Which isn't to say that this isn't what you should aim for, but that when you're dealing with stakeholders and there's an expectation of, move fast and do things like experimentation often gets lost in a universe where people say, I don't need to experiment, just ask this almost, supernatural entity on whether this messaging is more effective than that. There is the challenge that I think I'm bringing up, and I'm sorry, I'm also being
No,
long-winded.
no, no,
Get
please.
this,
It's great.
I'll get to the question that in a universe where folks can be silly enough to replace experimentation with asking AI, how can PMMs kind of bring up the understanding that getting that customer insight is more valuable at scale, particularly when enterprise marketing, getting that kind of sample set, having those conversations and getting that data becomes harder and harder.
That is really, really important. And I think you, well, I guess your question framed another. I'm trying to think what is the best way to answer this question. It's a hard one. I don't think I have the perfect answer. Right. And I think there are going to be some companies where the leadership literally just don't understand and don't care to understand, in which case it's going to be impossible to convince them otherwise. And best bet for people, unfortunately, is to go find somebody else, some other company to work for, right? Because there will be people who do that. And I guarantee you, when a leader thinks that way, I don't think the company is going to survive for very long. Because fundamentally, if you're building a business not with true customer insights, you're just not going to succeed, right? And so I think back to your point about using human and customer insights, again, is tying back to revenue. If it's a B2B focused company, being very, very close to sales and using that information to drive insights, and then taking that information and then establishing benchmarks with your leadership to say, okay, this is what we've learned and this is what I'm going to propose we do. And then let's measure the improvement they're going to have right over the next quarter to see what we can do. To me, that is the real and only way to truly prove the results. And then the other thing is, even if the leadership doesn't agree, build a relationship with the different stakeholder teams, and then they can speak and advocate on your behalf to leadership, right? To say, actually, whatever, Vipul's team has provided has been the most valuable we've seen, and whatever battle card he shared from actual real insights was much more effective, was the most effective thing we've had in the past 6 months, right? That ultimately, I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's not going to be a change from in one day. It's going to be a gradual change and a gradual shift. And it does require a lot of work from the PMM side to educate different stakeholders, including the C suite, on how to do things right and the value of product marketing for that matter. So, and I even wrote it in my latest newsletter about this, which is driving influence, right? It's a core part of PMM's work. And some people just don't like doing that. And that is fine. But then I tell people, like, maybe this isn't the right path for you, right? Because this role, regardless whether you use AI or not, requires significant amount of cross-functional influence. That's just part of the job.
And I think that's something that at least this generation of Gen AI tools cannot replace, letting you know how to talk to people, because all the advice and best practices fail in reality. So that definitely resonates.
Yeah.
So, one last thing, and I think then I'll hand off to Varun because he has a lot to ask about the future of AI as well. But in terms of the challenges that come with AI, the flip side of it is, and the good of it is, that you can use AI to orchestrate a lot of
Mhm.
the grunt work. But the challenge there is that sometimes the grunt work gives you a sense of understanding, right? Like
Yes.
you were saying that building out a battle card or having an understanding of why it said what it said in a
Mhm.
generation that might not ever know that that was a problem or a challenge or that required, fundamental,
Mhm.
iterative, granular effort. How do we kind of inculcate that sense today to make sure that we are building our skill set for growing in the future where AI might make it so easy for people to do it that learning becomes less important?
Right. It's kind of like back in the day, right? Before the calculators arrived, you have to do like your own multiplications, right? Like long math or whatever you call long division. But um, let's say there is a junior PMM coming to me and they're like struggling with this question. What I will tell them is this: go to a company that is large enough where you can learn how to do it properly. It is going to be extremely challenging for you to be a founding PMM at a company as a first time PMM because you're not learning from anybody and there will be 20 different requests coming your way. So I think if I think you really have to think clearly, depending on your career stage, which type of company is going to be best suited for you, right? Having a bigger company, having a big team with mentorship and everything allows you to spend some more time learning so that you can provide the best value and output, right? And then as you grow, obviously, you can use that information and decide to go elsewhere. A smaller company where you might have to just create 3 different work streams with AI, right? And generate a bunch of stuff. So that's probably what, and then, so that's one thing, right? And then secondly is spending time outside of your work. Like, let's say in the worst circumstances, like you can't get that, the only job you found was in a very small company and you have to figure out how to do that very quickly. I would invest time with through mentorship, coaching, right? And courses such as yours, right? To really invest the time to go through things the hard way. All right. Even if it's just once, so that you can really get the gist of it and then take that back to your work, because that will actually help you build better AI workflows, right? Because you still have to give instructions to AI. Like, it has to be the right instructions. Otherwise, your AI workflows would not be good anyways if you don't know how to do it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
I don't have the
Yep.
magic wand.
We all wish we have that. But even sticking to the report, while working on it, was there any particular story or response from a PMM that really surprised you, either in a good or maybe in a concerning way as well? Any interesting story that you heard?
You know what is one interesting insight that I thought was very just not surprising, but it gave a different view, was the challenges and limitations with AI. So I asked one of that question during my research, and um, what I didn't really expect was the expectation on the company's part on AI usage. So a couple of people basically said there is lack of guidance from a company's part on how AI should be used. And it's literally like there's two sides. On one side, they want people to use AI because they want to improve proficiency. On the other hand, if they see something's AI produced, they completely discount the work and then say it's crap, basically, right? So you're basically caught in the middle as a PMM. Is like, what am I supposed to be doing here? And so that's one of the reasons I also read the report. It's for leaders to think about how they need to do good and responsible AI within the company. And the solution here is by creating extremely clear guidelines on AI usage, um, make demystify and destigmatize the usage of AI, but also promoting information exchange, learning, right? And positive, healthy competition within the company so people provide the best quality work, right? That is a combination of AI plus human. So I think a lot of the issues, not all, but a big portion of the issues rising from the challenge of using AI, like you pointed out earlier, was because the founders themselves and leaders themselves don't have a clue what they want from people. Like I would bet what they all want is high quality, great work that is going to help them make more money in the shortest time possible, right? That's what everybody wants. But so if that's the goal here, I don't think most of them can clearly state how to get there with AI, right? And that is the hard part of the work they need to do to map out their goal, their strategy, their tactics, so that the AI can really help complement that and not take it over.
That's actually on point where everybody wants to adopt the AI, but at the same time they want to not say that we are adopting AI. They just want to stay away from it. That we are all natural and everything. That's totally
Totally
uh,
right. And then they'll be like, oh, here, you should do this to improve your workflows. And then zero guidance, right? It's like no play, nothing. You're supposed to just figure it out on your own. So,
so. Have you seen this as a pattern where leadership has been the hurdle in adoption?
100%. Yeah. like this is especially more prevalent for companies that are smaller in size. So they would hire a very small PMM team, maybe 1 or 2 PMMs. So let's say before AI, they would have hired four PMMs, right? Now they're hiring only 2 PMMs. And then they're like, okay, now you guys figure out how to automate everything and just scale. And we want to achieve the same results that we're going to achieve with 4 people. And there's zero playbook, and you just have to figure out your own, right? Like there was a person who came to me, a founding PMM who came to me and asking for potential coaching and help because literally in the first week of her new job, she was asked to create a competitive intelligence program to enable all salespeople to create a customer advisory console, to create a customer community to drive engagement and retention for her customers, and to manage all product launches coming up in the next 3 quarters, right? And she was like, I don't know what to do. Like, yeah, I'm like, first of all, you need to go tell them no way and help them prioritize this, right? And I think that's another thing is, remember, you can push back on people, right? And tell them you're nuts, well, in a nicer way than that, basically. But but basically saying, what is the goal you're trying to achieve? And now you're asking me to do this. What is the thing that's going to drive the most traction to helping achieve those goals? That is what I'm spending my time on. Everything else, I'm going to deprioritize, right? Until next quarter. Part of your job as a product marketer is managing up and managing around as well. And that means intentionally pushing back, providing alternative solutions as you do so as well.
I just feel bad for whoever that person was. That sounds horrifying. It's nightmare fuel. I mean,
It
PMMs
is.
are already some of the most misunderstood, hardest driven, not necessarily hardest working, but hardest driven people in an organization. When you couple that with AI fantasies and the assumption that they can do everything, it just gets worse and worse.
Right. I agree with you. I will say the one silver lining with the whole AI thing is that it's not affecting just PMMs, it's affecting every other industry. So I pay attention closely to other industries because I think to be a good product marketer, you need to learn about other jobs around you, right? So product management is getting heavily disrupted, right? There are entire articles written about like the death of PM or something like that, right? Or like growth marketers, where you can pretty much, there are software out there that automates entire campaigns for you. Right. So it's like, I feel like while we're getting disrupted, the silver lining is that product marketing is still very strategic and there are core components that most people still know cannot be automated. So, and it, especially the positioning messaging part, like a decent founding team would know that they need humans to do the job, right? Um, but um, but yeah, we are in a really interesting time, I will say. Only yeah, we don't know what's going to happen, but we can hope for the best and
And
prepare
that,
us.
right, and that's where my next question is. So in our community and beyond, we have seen a year of a poor job situation that is showing no signs of letting up. Lots of leading technology companies are also cutting down headcounts mercilessly and citing AI as a reason. So
Yes.
from your point of view, how seriously should PMMs take the potential of AI replacing them? And is this limited to junior PMM or does it extend to PMM leadership as well?
Well, you're asking such a great question. It's actually happening across all levels, and I've seen it. So, funnily, the same day I released my AI report, a friend of mine told me that his entire team at a large SaaS company was laid off, the entire product marketing team. And I'm only saying this because he told me it's okay to say, right, to share this information. Because I was like, yeah, make it known to people because I want, like, I'm happy to share this is what's happening on the ground, right? And it's an entire company that replaced PMMs with AI workflows, and they basically just absorbed the team into product management. And they're saying, okay, now product managers, not only do you have to build your own products, you also have to launch your products and do everything else around it. So again, I don't know how it's going to work out. So from the looks of it, I don't believe the company is doing that well, which is why they're cutting down a lot of workforces. So, but it's happening all around from the entire team, from leader to mid-level to junior people. And I've seen it repeated several times at other companies as well. To me, the one consistent pattern I'm seeing across all the people they've been cutting is that the way the product marketing team that was set up for those companies was never right in the first place. So in this instance, for this large company, the PMMs were doing mostly tactical work. They were basically creating only collaterals, and they were doing support for each launch. They were not doing original research. So there was no research arm within the team. There's no insights part of product marketing. The insights were sitting within product management, right? And when you don't have that, what's the point, right? Of course, you're just a bunch of support people, right? And they're just going to be cut. So I don't think it's a real threat in the way that real good PMM teams are getting cut. It's basically all the bad PMM teams, unfortunately, were getting cut, right? And because they weren't set up to be well to begin with. And that's a pattern I've noticed over the past few years, is that more and more PMM teams that were created are created in the wrong way, because the leaders who created them never had PMM experience, right? It was like some marketing leader, mostly coming from demand gen, trying to create a PMM team. So then they would create a team that they think is doing product marketing, but it really is not. What I think is going to happen is there will be more consolidation, and there are already more consolidation within PMM. So there will be fewer jobs. And that's just market correction, because I do believe there was overhiring during the post-COVID bump. There were just too many PMM jobs available. I was like, wow, that just doesn't make any sense, right? So we've been returning back to that, to pre-COVID levels, essentially. And then first, there will be a separation. There will be a group of PMMs who are absolutely amazing what they're doing, and they're going to be extremely sought after. And then there will be some people who are going to be left behind, unfortunately, right? If they're not preparing themselves, future-proofing themselves with skills necessary. And that divide is what I think is going to happen, and is already happening.
Got it. So just a counter question on this. So when as a leader, I'm building my own PMM team.
Mhm.
So how specifically in this era of AI, what kind of qualities basically I should look for in PMM and how I should hire them? And same question will come from the PMMs as well. When they want to get hired, what qualities they should be having so that they are more hireable.
Great question. So let's start with the leader side. If I'm a leader today and I'm going to a company trying to build a PMM team, what am I thinking about? Number one, I want to hire a product marketer who has really strong core competencies in product marketing. And the most important skill set I will be looking for is positioning and messaging. People can create content, they can do whatever, right? But the one thing you cannot replace is to create absolutely amazing positioning and messaging. That tells me they have the necessary experience when it comes to synthesizing information, recognizing patterns across different sources of data, right? Which I call pattern recognition. Pattern recognition is not replaceable by AI whatsoever, right? Because it comes from your experience and your observations. And then being able to take that information and create something very, very compelling through a strategic lens. So I was literally thinking about writing a post about this today, because I was like, I was really fed up with the entire hiring process where, like they give you like this lengthy assignments where you have to do like, you have to create an entire go-to-market plan for them in 40 hours, which is insane in my opinion. And it doesn't really test somebody's skill set. I was like, if I were to test a candidate, I would just do an actual working session with them in an hour. And I would just tell them, we're going to try to revise our positioning and messaging, right? Let me know what kind of questions I can answer for you so that we can arrive at an answer after the session. We literally just have a discussion, because in real life, in real time, I can tell how they think. What information do they know is going to feed into this, right? And then are they talking about different stakeholders they need to bring into this, right? I can just quickly tell right away how they do everything. So that is what I would be looking for. And the second thing, I would also look for somebody who is more quantitative. I do believe a good product marketer needs to have quantitative background. And I think that means ability to synthesize data and provide insights from such data. Second is looking at business metrics, almost like thinking a little bit more like a growth marketer, understanding business performance metrics, tying results directly to business performance, right? And if possible, being able to create their own dashboards, to measure everything from lagging to early indicators, right? And that is because then they can basically prove their own jobs in some ways and prove the job of the function. And then three for me is just somebody who is super curious in learning and try to improve. And that again is not a skill set is taught. It's just it's very clear when somebody is extremely curious and they go above and beyond. They think about what you might need before you even need it. I'll give you an example. One of the candidates I hired in my previous role, He was one of the PMMs with the least experience in PMM. So initially, I actually dismissed his resume. He sent it, I rejected it, right? And then he reached out to me on LinkedIn, and he was like, Yi Lin, I have this background. I think I'm going to bring a lot of value. I just have want to chat with you for 15 minutes, if that's okay. Chatted with him for 15 minutes. He asked some really great questions. After that, he was like, Yi Lin, from our conversation, I realized competitive differentiation was a big challenge you had. And I know you had challenge with this competitor. I actually went ahead and did some competitive research for you. Here's what I found. Bam, he shared like a 10-page competitive research with actual interviews with one of our competitors he was able to find and recruit. And he showed, this is what person A said about this, based on this, right? I would try to change this thing. But also, of course, it's not everything. So if I were to come to your company, this is what I would do next, right? Immediately I was like blown away, interviewed him, blah, blah, blah. And then he was hired, right? And he was like a star performer at the company. And I even recently he got promoted, I found out. So anyways, long story short is strategic, quantitative skills, good human quality. Those are the three things I would look for.
That's insane. I mean, curiosity, the kind of dedication he has shown going above and beyond is really commendable.
Yeah, it's so, and I coach people on job search. And I would say 70% of PMMs I've recently coached that received the job went above and beyond. They went and did something extra by reflecting back on the conversations they've had, right? And sending them something of extreme value that they can use right away. And of course, when it gives you value already before they're even hired, you're like, of course, I want to hire that person or somebody else, right? So that's what I would say. And then this dives right into the question you asked me about the other side. So how does candidates prepare? I do think on the candidate side, apart from going above and beyond and all that stuff, the number one thing is to actually vet the company, because there are so many companies out there, to your point, that just they're not great companies. So, and it's unfortunate because I've talked to people who have joined a company and then they leave 3 months later because they're like, oh, this is toxic. They don't understand product marketing at all, right? So I think doing some back channeling and due diligence on your part, asking the right questions. Why are you hiring? What do you think is product marketing? Right? Like, what do you believe is the value I can bring to the table? How can I make decisions in the role? What kind of Can you give me examples of projects where I'm making food decisions versus projects where I would need to ask for permission, right? Just very detailed questions to really understand how they think about product marketing. That's number one. Second thing is to focus on competitive differentiation. Target narrow as much as possible when you're applying, where you're going to really, really shine. And then making sure your own positioning in the interview is going to be very focused and specific, right? So that whatever answer you're delivering is going to be just so much more specific and compelling compared to something else. And then lastly, of course, is that going above and beyond piece to really stand out. I know there are some managers, hiring managers right now are asking more and more about how you are using AI in your workflow. I actually wrote a post about that. I think the question behind the question is not asking you, are you using ChatGPT? Are you using blah, 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 right? That is not the question at all. It's asking you about your thought process behind AI. So having a point of view and share that. For instance, here's how I think about AI. This is the purpose of AI. This is how I would use AI in my workflow, right? And here's an example of how I would do that specifically. And this is the results I was able to produce. That thought process is going to be much more effective than just listing a lot of different tools. I can go on about this for 2 hours. I'll just stop now.
Yeah, but there's one part of your report that I like the best, that it wasn't just talking about the state of things, it was also giving PMMs great actionable advice on how they could use AI to get ahead. And while everyone who's watching this should go through Yi Lin's amazing report on the subject, what is one piece of advice that if you wanted every PMM to kind of get from the report, what would it be about how to use AI to get ahead in their career?
Um, Start with the goals and objective first before plugging in any AI. Work backwards, right? So it's backwards thinking, backwards research planning, whatever you call it. Start with goal and then go from there. Don't start with the task. That is the biggest thing not to do, right? A lot of people is like, I have to do a bunch of tasks. That's useless. So goal is I need to create the absolute best product launch possible by driving the absolute highest adoption of this tool that I'm going to release. How do I get there? Let's break down the workflow, the pieces, And then for each piece of the workflow, think about the part the AI can automate and then the part you have to do as a human, right? So it's like starting big with a goal and then breaking it down into parts and pieces and then go from there.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Elin. This has been an absolutely perfect conversation and covered so much ground. I'm sure that anyone who's listening in has a better idea of how they can stand out while applying for product marketing roles, how they can use AI more effectively, and how they can make sure they don't turn into some half GPT spouting, non-effective, non-basically strategic product marketer. So really appreciate your time, Elin, and thank you so much.
Of course, thank you so much. You asked really great questions, so I appreciate that.
A couple of questions, Yilin. There are from the community. So when we told our
Sure,
community that you are coming for the podcast, they have some interesting question for you. So I'll
cool. Sure.
ask a couple of them. Uh, the person asking that he is a budding PMM, he's starting his PMM journey. So, what are the tools you would tell him to start focusing more on? Obviously, you mentioned the usual suspect like ChatGPTs and Perplexity and everything, but are there any specific tools that you yourself use and you will also recommend them?
That's a really great question. I actually have been looking more into vibe coding, and I also have several of my clients vibe coding their own tools. I think
Right.
that might be very interesting. And by vibe coding, I don't mean just coding an entire workflow, right, or whatnot. But what it does, vibe coding, is that you can provide an output very quickly for people to visualize. And I think that can help with bring more alignment within the product marketing team with their own stakeholders. As an
Right.
example, one of my clients actually vibe coded a product launch plan. So it's like she's using that, she vibe coded it, right? And she tracks every launch with that. And instead of just building a static template or whatever, she'd make that really quickly within 2 days. And now the product team can use it, right? So she was using that to drive alignment. So, that might be something that actually can be interesting to explore after, of course, the person has mastered the fundamentals of product marketing.
Right. Great. Yes, I think most of the questions are around the same line, so you already combined them. Again, thank you so much, Eileen, for doing this. Any final thoughts that you want to share? And one final question from my side. What's one thing you wish more people understand about product marketing, which is kind of misconception? And if you want to combine that with AI, obviously.
That's a really good question. Um, I think we already talked about so much misconceptions, right? Like, it's not a service function, all that kind of stuff. I actually think the misconception is that product marketing is new. Product marketing is not new. It's been, like I mentioned from the beginning, right? Now going all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, it's been there for hundreds of years because ultimately the job of a product marketer is to tell the story of the product so more people buy it and love it. And that's it. And that's what people have been doing for hundreds of years. So when we think about it that way, what we're doing is just strategy work. We're just basically business strategists, right? And back in the day, whether it's brand management or it's corporate strategy or some other teams at different kinds of companies, they were basically doing bits and pieces of product marketing. It's just called product marketing now in tech companies, right? Without a corporate strategy team for most companies. So we're kind of doing that. So I think just having that mindset hopefully brings more peace of mind to people to understand this role is here to stay. It's not just some new role, a fad role that's here for like a few years and it's going to be going away. So that's what I'll say.
Absolutely. Cool, Gillian. Thank you so much again. And before we close, obviously, most of our community members and our listeners already follow you on LinkedIn. They also read your blogs, but anything you want to plug in from your side?
I mean, just read my AI report if you haven't already. And if mind sharing the link, that'll be perfect. And also, Vipu mentioned I have some other resources. There is an onboarding guide that I shared that can share, and also there's a job search guide that I have for everybody, and they're all free, so you can just download them any moment.
Cool. People, before we close, anything you want to add?
Oh, thank you so much, Elin. We'll make sure that those pieces are linked in the video below when it's on YouTube. So please see for it and click through. Yilin was honestly one of the first resources I picked up with the 30, 60, 90-day plan. It would be helpful to everyone. So thank you again, Yilin.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
Thank you so much, all of you, and whoever is listening to us. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we will surely come up with few more exciting episodes with PM leaders in the future. Thank you so much.
Bye.